Hello and welcome to the News by Standards. Water companies could face unlimited fines for dumping sewage under government plans due to be unveiled in the coming days. Ministers want to lift a cap of £250,000 for penalties for firms that release sewage into rivers and the sea. Releases of untreated waste are legal in some cases, but they also pose risks to human health and to ecosystems. Official figures show an average of 825 sewage spills per day into England's waterways in the last year. Latest figures from the Environment Agency, the EA, showed a total of 301,881 sewage spills in 2022. This represented a 90% decrease from 2021, but the EA put the drop largely down to drier weather rather than the actions of water companies. In the coming days, ministers are set to announce plans to make polluters pay, addressing all sources of pollution, including from plastics and chemicals used in farming. Environment Secretary Therese Coffey said she would be making sure that money from higher fines and penalties taken from water company profits, not customers, is channeled directly back into rivers, lakes and streams where it is needed. Currently, such money goes to the Treasury, but the plans will see money funneled to the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, instead into a water restoration fund. Companies are allowed to discharge untreated sewage into rivers in exceptional circumstances, for example during a heavy rain, but they can be acting illegally if they pump sewage into water when the conditions are dry or if they are not treating enough of the waste before releasing it. Water UK, which represents the water industry, insisted there were very high levels of compliance, citing government data. So while enforcement is vital if rules are broken, it will only ever be a tiny part of the effort to restore rivers to where they need to be, it added in a statement. The vast majority of improvement will come from investment, where we are bringing forward £56 billion to accelerate work on storm overflows. The government said the volume of spillages recorded in the latest data were unacceptable. Ms Coffey also wants the Environment Agency to be able to impose sanctions without going through the courts, although it is expected that serious cases will still go through criminal proceedings. Responding to Friday's figures on sewage spills, Labour said the government had allowed waterways to be treated as open sewers. The UK needed a strong plan to tackle sewage, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer told reporters on Saturday, adding that he was disgusted with what's been going on. Labour has previously announced proposals to make monitoring all sewage outlets mandatory and to impose automatic fines for sewage dumping if it gains power. The Liberal Democrats went as far as to say Ms Coffey should resign over the figures, while the Green Party said water companies should face greater accountability. Under the government announcements, the Environment Secretary is expected to stress that she understands the need to protect the nation's rivers, lakes, streams and coastlines. In a statement, Ms Coffey said, "I want to make sure that regulators have the powers and tools to take tough action against companies that are breaking the rules and to do so more quickly." The government has said that the fund will be used to help restore wetlands, create new habitats in important nature sites and better manage rivers. It will release further details on the Water Restoration Fund management in due course. Charles Watson, chairman and founder of River Action, said removing the cap on fines may mean the government has finally woken up to the huge public outcry to what's happened to our rivers. At the moment, the penalty regimes for water companies does not provide a big enough deterrent, and by uncapping fines there is now potential of real teeth, he added. Speaking to BBC Radio 4's Today programme, Mr Watson questioned how the Water Restoration Fund would be enforced. He explained that environmental protection through the EA had suffered cutbacks which limited its ability to monitor, and ministers are facing the prospect of a legal challenge if they go ahead with plans to house asylum seekers on a barge off the Dorset coast. The Home Office is reportedly looking to use the Bibby Stockholm for the migrants to reduce reliance on the hotels. Portland Port said it had been selected to provide accommodation, but the government has not yet commented. Local Conservatives MP Richard Dratz said every action is being looked at to halt the plans, including a legal case. The government says more than £6 million a day is being spent on hotels for migrants, but charities say military bases and boats are wholly inadequate places to house people fleeing war and persecution. The three-storey Bibby Stockholm, which has 222 rooms and can house more than 500 people, has been refurbished since it was criticised as an oppressive environment when the Dutch government used it for asylum seekers. The vessel now has ensuite rooms, a TV and games room and a gym, according to a fact sheet from its owners Bibby Maritime. The UK-based company refused to confirm the deal to the BBC, but said it provides practical, safe and comfortable accommodation for a wide range of clients across the globe. Environment Secretary Therese Coffey said the government's priority is to convert disused military bases for use as migrant accommodation, but said it was actively considering what could be done with some of these floating vessels. But the priority is making sure we get those bases deployed first, she said. Details about any deal to use the Bibby Stockholm barge have not yet been confirmed, but a Home Office spokesperson said the pressure on the asylum system has continued to grow and requires us to look at a range of accommodation options which offer better value for money for taxpayers than the hotels. The chief executive of Portland Port, Bill Reeves, said his site had been selected by the Home Office to provide space for an accommodation facility, adding that he was liaising with the Home Office about the next steps. Mr. Drax, whose constituency includes Portland, has criticised the plans. "We want to get this consigned to the dustbin before anything's signed," Mr. Drax said, urging Home Secretary Suella Braverman to cancel it because this is not the right place. Mr. Drax said he was concerned about keeping vulnerable individuals in a very, very restricted area, placing extra pressure on the port's very small police force. "This is an extremely sensitive area which relies heavily on summer trade. I cannot see how this is going to be anything but detrimental." Dorset Council has also said it has serious concerns about the suitability of the location for this facility. Speaking to the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg on Sunday, Ms. Braverman refused to confirm the deal, saying her office was looking at all sorts of lands, sites and vessels. More than 51,000 asylum seekers are currently being housed in nearly 400 hotels around the UK. As part of efforts to tackle the issue, last week Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick announced plans to use ex-military bases to house migrants. He told the Commons that the sheer number of small boats had overwhelmed the asylum system, adding the government would not elevate the well-being of illegal migrants above the British people. Accommodation for migrants should meet essential living needs and nothing more, because we cannot risk becoming a magnet for the millions of people who are displaced and seeking better economic prospects. The plans were criticised by Labour, with Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper saying the announcement was an admission of failure. They've got this huge backlog of asylum decisions, so much so that 98% of last year's small boats arrivals simply haven't even been decided or processed. TikTok has been fined £12.7 million by the UK's data watchdog for failing to protect the privacy of children. An investigation by the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, found the video sharing site used the data of children aged under 13 without parental consent. It estimated TikTok allowed up to 1.4 million UK children of this age to use the platform in 2020. TikTok said it had invested heavily to stop under 13s accessing the site. Our 40,000 strong safety team works around the clock to help keep the platform safe for our community, a spokesperson said. While we disagree with the ICO's decision, which relates to May 2018 to July 2020, we are pleased that the fine announced today has been reduced to under half the amount proposed last year. We will continue to review the decision and are considering next steps. Despite TikTok's rules requiring children under 13s to have parental consent to use the platform, the ICO said many were able to set up accounts without this. It is one of the largest fines the ICO has issued. Professor Sonia Livingston, who researches children's digital rights and experiences at the London School of Economics and Political Science, told the BBC it was great the ICO is taking action, but feared the fine amount could be shrugged off as the cost of doing business. Let's hope TikTok reviews its practices thoroughly and make sure that it respects children's privacy and safety proactively in the future. In September, the watchdog issued TikTok with a notice of intent, a precursor to handing down a potential fine. Information Commissioner John Edwards said there are laws in place to make sure our children are safe in the digital world as they are in the physical world. TikTok did not abide by those laws. As a consequence, an estimated 1 million under 13s were inappropriately granted access to the platform, with TikTok collecting and using their personal data. That means that their data may have been used to track them and profile them, potentially delivering harmful, inappropriate content at their very next scroll. TikTok should have known better. TikTok should have done better. Our £12.7 million fine reflects the serious impact their failures may have had. A few weeks ago, they sat drinking tea in the cosy kitchen of a father of three who was trying to take on YouTube for this very reason. Campaigner Duncan McCann wanted the ICO to act because he claimed the video sharing platform was violating the regulator's own children's code, which demands high levels of data privacy for children by default. It means not collecting their data and using it to serve them ads or recommendations, and not encouraging them to share more data through enticing design features. The type of data ranges from their activity on the platforms and elsewhere on the net to personal information about them, such as their location and the device they are using. Mr. McCann said it was like having an adult standing behind them with a clipboard, writing down everything they do. Like TikTok, YouTube is supposed to be for children aged 13 and over, but if you have any younger children in your life, you'll almost certainly find that if they're not using the platforms, they have friends who are. Both firms say they're doing everything they can to protect children online and provide a safe experience. TikTok's fine is for activity which predates the introduction of the code in 2020, for which the penalties can be high, although no firm has so far been found to be in breach. And the UK Online Safety Bill, due to be passed in the coming months, requires strict age verification processes by social networks, some of whom, like Instagram, are already beginning to implement them. Hitting wealthy tech firms in the pocket with big fines seems to be the authorities' third deterrent. But while £12.7 million is not a fine you or I would like to receive in the post, TikTok's parent company ByteDance ByteDance is reported to have made $80 billion in revenue in 2022. With the platform already under global scrutiny over security concerns, this is undoubtedly a blow it could do without, but it's not going to make a big dent in its finances as things stand. TikTok is allowed to appeal against the scale of the fine and has 28 days to make representations. If successful, the ICO could reduce the final amount. The regulator has a maximum of 16 weeks from issuing the notice of a proposed fine to delivering its final verdict. Fines received by the ICO go back to the Treasury. Many Western countries are taking measures against TikTok, which is owned by ByteDance, a Chinese tech company, over fears users' data will be shared with the Chinese government. The app has been banned on government devices in Canada, Belgium, Denmark, New Zealand, Taiwan, the UK, the US, and for anyone working at the European Commission. TikTok boss Shou Zi was grilled in Congress over its safety and tried to reassure lawmakers that users' data is secure. The BBC has advised staff to delete TikTok from corporate phones. Electric car maker Tesla has been ordered to pay almost $3.2 million or £2.6 million to a black former worker after he won a racial harassment lawsuit. Owen Diaz, a Lyft operator from 2015 to 2016, at its Fremont factory was subjected to a racially hostile work environment, a federal jury found. However, the payment has been slashed by 98% from the $137 million that he was originally awarded in 2021. A judge ruled last year that the initial amount was excessive. On Monday, Mr. Diaz was awarded $3 million in punitive damages and $175,000 in damages for emotional distress. If we had been allowed to introduce new evidence, the verdict would have been zero, IMO, Tesla chief executive Elon Musk said on Twitter. Jury did the best they could with the information they had. I respect the decision, he added. Mr. Musk did not provide details of what new evidence Tesla would have presented. Tesla's lawyer Alex Spiro declined to comment. The company did not immediately respond to a BBC request for comment. In the original lawsuit, Mr. Diaz alleged that African American workers encountered a scene straight from the Jim Crow era at the firm's plant in Fremont, California. He claimed that black workers regularly faced racist slurs on the factory floor and racist graffiti in bathrooms. The lawsuit also said the employees would refer to areas where black or African American staff worked with racist historical names such as the plantation. It alleged that one worker heard racial slurs as often as 50 to 100 times a day. In 2021, a federal court in San Francisco found that Tesla did not take reasonable steps to tackle the abuse despite complaints to supervisors. The jury awarded Mr. Diaz $137 million in damages. At the time, Tesla disputed the verdict but said it recognized it was not perfect. In April 2022, a US federal judge cut Mr. Diaz's award to $15 million and said the compensation decided by jurors was extremely high. Bernard Alexander, a lawyer for Mr. Diaz, said last week that Mr. Diaz's outlook on the world has been permanently changed. That is what happens when you take away a person's safety. Mr. Alexander had to award his client nearly $160 million in damages. However, Tesla's lawyer, Mr. Spiro, argued that Mr. Diaz's lawyers had failed to show that any serious long-lasting damage had been caused by Tesla. They're just throwing numbers up on the screen like this is some kind of game show, Mr. Spiro said. House prices fell in March at their fastest annual pace for 14 years, according to the latest figures from Nationwide. The lenders said prices were down 3.1% compared with a year earlier, the largest annual decline since July 2009. The Nationwide said the housing market reached a turning point last year after the financial market turbulence which followed the mini-budget. Since then, activity has remained subdued, it added. It'll be hard for the market to regain much momentum in the near term since consumer confidence remains weak and household budgets remain under pressure from high inflation, said Robert Gardner, Nationwide's chief economist. A drop in house prices would generally be welcomed by potential first-time buyers who have watched property values surge even during the pandemic. However, the reality is that renting has become more expensive for many people and mortgage rates are higher than they might plan for, the continuing rise in many regular bills, and food prices are also adding to the financial strain. The Nationwide's findings, based on its own lending data, suggest prices have now fallen for 7 months in a row. This echoes the general conclusion of other house price surveys and commentary which show a slowdown in the sector and fall in prices. In March, the Office of Budget Responsibility, which advises the government on the health of the economy, predicted that house prices will drop by 10% between their peak last year and the middle of next year. The Nationwide said prices were already 4.6% below their peak after taking seasonal factors into account. Alice Hayne, analyst at investment platform Best Invest, said what's clear is that the red-hot property market of pandemic days, when buyers snapped up bigger homes in the race for space, aided by temporary stamp duty incentives, is now behind us, with buyers and lenders taking a far more conservative approach towards home ownership. Concern over mortgage rates is a major factor in the slowdown in the sector. Rates surged after last year's mini-budget during the short-lived Liz Liz Truss government. Although the rates have dropped back partially since a succession of base rate rises by the Bank of England have fed through, so interest rates on home loans are higher now than people became accustomed to in the past decade. Although the UK's housing market is made up of a series of local property sectors, the nationwide regional breakdown for the first 3 months of the year suggested a slowdown across all areas of the country. Nadhim Zahawi has been reselected as a Conservative candidate for Stratford-on-Avon after being sacked as Tory party chairman in January. The Executive Council of the town's Conservative Association met on Friday evening, where they confirmed they had re-adopted Mr Zahawi. He was first elected as MP for Stratford-on-Avon in 2010. The MP was embroiled in a row over his tax affairs as Chancellor, which led to his sacking. Mr Zahawi has previously insisted that he acted properly and that his tax error was careless and not deliberate. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said Mr Zahawi had committed a serious breach of the Ministerial Code after he had failed to disclose that HMRC was investigating his tax affairs. An inquiry by the Prime Minister's ethics advisor Sir Lowry Magnus said his conduct fell below the high standards expected. Mr Zahawi reached a settlement with the tax authority in August 2022 when he was Chancellor, which should have been declared, his report said. Confirming Mr Zahawi will stand as a Tory candidate in Stratford-on-Avon at the next general election, the association said, "We look forward to continuing to work alongside him to deliver for the residents and communities within the constituency."
London City Airport has scrapped the 100ml liquid limit by using high-tech scanners, which also allow electronics to be kept in hand luggage at security. Travellers can now carry on up to 2 litres of liquid, and toiletries no longer have to be put in separate bags. It is the second UK airport to use this technology in all its security lanes after Teesside introduced it in March. The government has set a June 2024 deadline for most UK airports to install the machines. London City Airport has brought in the C3 scanners, which takes high-resolution 3D images of bags. Passengers at other airports currently have to remove items such as tablets, laptops, and liquids from hand luggage for security checks. The current rules were introduced in November 2006 at the end of the ban on liquids in the cabin, when British police said they had foiled a plot to blow up as many as 10 planes using explosive hidden in drinks. London City Airport started trialling the new technology more than a year ago and went live with 4 of the new X-ray machines, similar to CT scanners used in hospitals, on Tuesday. Chief Operating Officer Alison Fitzgerald said screening staff had been retrained to use the technology, which represents 3D imagery, and the public can be assured it is safe. The level of processing now through the X-ray is even more secure than it was previously, and the machine has the ability to differentiate between a non-dangerous and a dangerous liquid. The machine would still reject images it was not happy with, she said, but it would allow staff to focus on potential threats while allowing items such as water, shampoo, and perfume to go through. It would also speed up the door-to-gate process with estimates of a 30% increase in passenger numbers. The whole process is quicker on the basis that previously you needed to empty your bag and put that in multiple trays, whereas now it's one bag in one tray and you don't need to take everything out. Which consumer expert Harry Kind said while it was the beginning of the end of the system introduced 17 years ago, people should not assume it was a rule change across the board. It's really important passengers actually check what the rules are for the airports they're flying from and flying to, but crucially it should reduce waiting times. Many travellers reported delays of up to an hour at security, and in a recent Which survey, 7% said that they had missed a flight because of queues. This change will make a massive difference and reduce the number of people missing flights and losing out on their holidays just because they've got too big a bottle of shampoo. London City Airport was already the fastest of the UK airports it surveyed for security times, with an average of 12 minutes. The largest of the UK's airports are rolling out the next generation technology on a gradual basis. Heathrow trialled 3D scanners in 2017 and said with more security lanes than any other airport, installing the new machines was always going to be complex and take longer. Gatwick is currently trialling one lane with next generation technology, and a spokesperson said passengers should continue to follow all existing rules. Other airports told the BBC they had no specific date for completion, but would be in line with the government deadline of June 2024. Billionaire Sir Richard Branson's rocket company Virgin Orbit has filed for bankruptcy in the US after failing to secure new investment. The satellite launch company halted operations weeks ago, but it hopes to find a buyer for the business. The company based in California announced last week that it would cut 85% of its 750-strong workforce. Earlier this year, a Virgin Orbit rocket failed to complete its first ever satellite launch from UK soil. Virgin Orbit's boss Dan Hart said that although the company had taken great efforts to address its finances and secure more funding, we ultimately must do what is best for the business. He said that Virgin Orbit will now concentrate on finding a buyer for the business to provide clarity on the future of the company to its customers, vendors, and employees. Virgin Orbit was founded in 2017 and is a spin-off from from Sir Richard's space tourism company Virgin Galactic. It launches rockets from beneath modified Boeing 747 planes to send satellites into space. But in January, an attempt to send a satellite into orbit from the UK for the first time failed because a rocket fuel filter had become dislodged, causing one of the engines to overheat. The mission, which launched from the spaceport Cornwall, which is based near Newquay, had been billed as a milestone for UK space exploration. It was hoped it would mark a major step in helping to turn the UK into a global player, from manufacturing satellites to building rockets and creating new spaceports. Virgin Orbit, which is mostly owned by Virgin Group, scrambled to find new funding following the UK rocket failure and paused operations last month to conserve cash. The company, which listed its shares on New York's Nasdaq index in 2021, had debts of £123 million as of September last year. On Tuesday, the company said Virgin Investments, part of Virgin Group, would provide $31.6 million in new money to help Virgin Orbit through the process of finding a new buyer. It has filed for what is known as Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the US. This allows a business to keep operating and address its financial issues while providing protection against creditors who are owed money. Melissa Quinn, head up Spaceport Cornwall, said the news about Virgin Orbit was very sad, but said the site would still remain focused on furthering the international space industry. She said it is the only licensed spaceport in the UK, has multiple users, and is working with other launch operators such as US company Sierra Space. This is not the end for Virgin Orbit. Quite a few space companies have gone through Chapter 11 only to re-emerge a few months later with new owners, no debts, and a healthy stash of investment cash to take the business forward. You'd look no further than London-based OneWeb, which has just now managed to complete its broadband internet constellation in the sky. But who will step forward to buy a rocket business? There are tens, if not hundreds, of similar enterprises across the world developing small launch vehicles. If Sir Richard Branson's company can claim one key separator, it ought to be responsiveness, the ability with its jumbo jet platform to launch from anywhere at short notice. This has appeal to the military, for example, except the firm has found it very hard to do, launching only twice last year. Any prospective new owner, therefore, will want to know a high cadence of launches can be achieved. This means going up every month, the original aim of the company. Mr. Hart said despite the financial problems, he was confident the company had a wide appeal to a new owner because its team had created cutting-edge launch technology. But Danny Houston, head of financial analysis at investment firm AJ Bell, said the company's failed launch mission from the UK was not the best advert for its technology. Neither is Virgin Orbit's collapse the best advert for the space investment theme. This industry may have significant potential at some point in the unknown future, but investors tempted to reach for the stars have only had their fingers burnt so far. The UK Space Agency said it had worked with Virgin Orbit for many years, but said its issues were a commercial matter for the company. It added that the UK space sector is thriving and said it generates £17.5 billion worth of income a year. So Richard is one of a very small group of billionaires who have expanded their business empires into launching satellites and attempts to pioneer commercial space travel. The others include Jeff Bezos, founder of online retailer Amazon, who set up his space company Blue Origin, as well as Twitter and Tesla owner Elon Musk, who founded SpaceX. So Richard and Virgin Group have invested more than $1 billion in the business in a quest to launch satellites through Virgin Orbit, but also to develop reusable space planes to take tourists on brief trips to suborbital space. Virgin Galactic has already started selling tickets for $250,000 for these journeys, and celebrities such as pop star Justin Bieber have signed up. But the main players in the billionaire space race have also faced criticism for what some see as offering joyrides for the super wealthy at a time when countries across the globe are being impacted by climate change. However, Mr. Bezos has insisted his space exploration is partly an environmental mission to take all heavy industry or polluting industry and move it into space and keep Earth as this beautiful gem of a planet that it is.
UK's housing model is broken and more homes are desperately needed, Michael Gove has said. The Housing Secretary said progress in tackling problems has been piecemeal, but insisted he was committed to increasing the housing supply. He also said he wanted to improve the quality of existing homes. Labour's Shadow Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook said almost 30,000 social homes had been lost since Mr. Gove became Housing Secretary in 2021. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said his party would, if elected to government, aim to increase home ownership to 70%. The Liberal Democrats have campaigned for renters to get longer tenancies and protection from unfair rent hikes. Mr. Gove made the comments in the foreword to a collection on essays on housing published by the Conservative think tank Bright Blue and the housing charity Shelter. He said the need for change was undeniable and the government was determined to build the new homes our country so urgently needs. That the current housing model from supply to standards and the mortgage market is broken, we can all agree. In their 2019 manifesto, the Conservatives, who have been in power since 2010, committed to building 300,000 homes in England every year by the mid-2020s. However, the party has found it difficult to make progress towards meeting the pledge. In 2020, plans to force local councils to accept new housing developments had to be paused following a fierce backlash from the government's own MPs. Last year, former Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick warned the government would miss its target by a country mile. And in December, the government was forced to water down the housing targets for local councils after nearly 60 Conservative MPs threatened to vote in favour of banning mandatory targets. In his foreword, Mr Gove said measures in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill would help increase supply while at the same time putting neighbourhoods firmly in control. The bill currently going through Parliament would introduce penalties for developers who are slow to build already approved homes. Mr Gove also said he wanted to increase the quality of existing homes in the rented sector by holding developers, local authorities and landlords to account. Recent high-profile cases, including the death of 2-year-old Awab Ishaq, has highlighted the problems of bad quality homes. Other Conservative MPs also contributed to the report, including Selaine Saxby, who suggested tax changes to ensure short-term holiday lets would not be able to claim mortgage rate relief. The North Devon MP said recent growth in the short-term holiday let market had led to big increases in house prices, making home ownership an unattainable dream for local people. Kent MP Damien Green said there needed to be more specialist accommodation for older people to move into, thereby freeing up big family homes. Joe Gideon, the Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent Central, said the government should provide more support to encourage developers to build on brownfield sites.
King Charles' portrait will appear on all standard Royal Mail stamps from now, but stock of these featuring the late Queen will be sold first. The change in the monarch's portrait comes the day after the prices of first and second class stamps went. On Monday, the cost of the first class stamp went up by 15 pence to £1.10, while second class stamps rose by 7 pence to 75 pence. Presentation packs of the new design featuring the King's head, which is without crown, are now on sale. The portrait, personally approved by the King, will be used on all definitive stamps, which are the regular, plain, non-commemorative postage stamps. His silhouette has already appeared on a special set showing popular garden flowers. However, the new everyday stamps are unlikely to be seen in regular use for some time yet. Post offices and retailers will continue to sell their existing stamps featuring Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth and will then be supplied with the new stamps when existing stocks at Royal Mail have been exhausted, a Royal Mail spokeswoman said. This will minimise the environmental and financial impact of the change of monarch on the design. Royal Mail is selling sets of the new stamps on its website. The new design was influenced by the classic profile of Queen Elizabeth created by the artist Arnold Machin in 1967. The King's portrait does not have any crown or royal symbols, unlike many of the predecessors where King's stamps often include an image of a crown and Queens are depicted wearing a crown or diadem. The design is based on a sculpture made by artist Martin Jennings for the new King Charles coins, with the image then digitally adapted for stamps. 50p coins carrying the image are already in circulation. King Charles became the 7th monarch to appear on stamps. Queen Victoria was the first in 1840 when her profile was shown on a penny black. The price rise of stamps took effect as a string of household bills become more expensive. Drivers planning to travel over the Easter bank holiday weekend are being warned to expect severe delays. Up to 17 million leisure trips are predicted to be made over the weekend, according to the RAC and transport analytics company Inrix. Major roads in southwest London and counties bordering London are likely to experience the worst congestion. Queues are likely to be increased by rail engineering works, including the closure of London Euston Station. More than double the normal traffic levels are predicted from the A303 westbound near Stonehenge in Wiltshire, the M5 south between Bristol and Bridgewater, and the M25 anti-clockwise between Hertfordshire and Surrey. A survey of 2,400 UK drivers commissioned by the RAC suggested 2.7 million car journeys have been planned for Good Friday and Easter Sunday by drivers embarking on day trips or overnight stays. Saturday and Easter Monday are expected to be slightly less busy, with 2.3 million separate getaway trips on each day. There is potential for another 7 million trips to be staggered throughout the long weekend if the weather conditions are dry and sunny. RAC spokesman Rod Dennis said the south and west of England are the areas to watch as they're home to some vital roads responsible for carrying vast numbers of people to the holiday destinations of the West Country. Traffic volumes could be even higher if the sun chooses to make a welcome appearance. Our advice to anyone heading that way is to get on the road as early as possible on Good Friday or travel on a different day entirely. Mr. Dennis also urged motorists to ensure tyres are properly inflated and to check levels of oil, coolant and screen wash before travelling. National Highways will temporarily remove more than 1,400 miles of roadworks on England's motorways and major A roads on Thursday until the 11th of April. It says that means more than 98% of its road network will be free from roadworks. However, Network Rail Rail is carrying out more than 600 engineering projects on Britain's railway over the Easter weekend. No trains will run to or from London Euston between Good Friday and Easter Monday, as the West Coast Main Line will be closed up to Milton Keynes Central. This will disrupt Avanti West Coast and London North Western railway services, while Caledonian sleeper trains will use London's King's Cross. Track and signalling modernisation work on some lines into London Victoria means Southern and Gatwick Express services will not call at the station during bank holiday weekend. Some trains will be diverted to London Bridge. Network Rail said it often schedules major engineering work for bank holidays to minimise disruption for passengers, as fewer people travel during these periods. Former Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson has died at the age of 91. Holding several cabinet posts under Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s, he was seen as one of the most consequential of all post-war UK chancellors. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called him an inspiration to me and many others. He is credited with creating powerful entrepreneurial forces in a decade also remembered by many communities around the UK as a time of widening inequality and painful deindustrialisation. Lord Lawson is survived by 6 children, including Nigella Lawson, a food writer and celebrity cook. The Prime Minister posted a picture of himself as Chancellor with the caption, "One of the first things I did as Chancellor was hang a picture of Nigel Lawson above my desk." In other tributes, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson called him a fearless and original flame of free market conservatism, who helped millions of British people achieve their dreams. Fellow former Prime Minister Liz Truss described him as a true giant of 20th century politics, adding his time at the helm of the Treasury was transformational. Current Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said his shoes had been impossible to fill, but he inspired all his successors, leaving the country more prosperous and enterprising. Former Chancellor Norman Lamont told the BBC he had a great sense of humour and fun, adding he was not a pompous character at all. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer described him as a real powerhouse. The Telegraph first reported his death, and his family are yet to comment. Before entering politics, Lawson was a successful financial journalist and continued publishing regular articles in the Telegraph and Spectator until as recently as November last year. He would go on to be one of the big beasts of Thatcher's cabinets, as well as serving as MP for the Blaby constituency from 1974 to 1992. Thatcher, who died in 2013, put him in charge of the Treasury in 1983, where he cut income tax, boosted share ownership and paid off government debt. As Chancellor, he modernised London's financial markets, overseeing the UK financial sector's Big Bang, where deregulation of stock exchange membership and embracing electronic trading helped to establish London as a major global financial centre. The resulting economic growth was eventually named the Lawson Broom after the Chancellor who had championed these changes. His stewardship of the economy was credited with helping Thatcher win a third term, but lower taxes together with cheaper borrowing fueled an unsustainable boom. Interest rates rose sharply and Britain went into recession. During his tenure, Thatcher called Lawson unassailable, but he resigned in 1989 after falling out with her over Europe. He stepped down as an MP at the 1992 election before entering the House of Lords as Lord Lawson of Blaby, only retiring last December. Lawson used his platform in the Lords to express scepticism of man-made climate change. In 2016, he became the chairman of Vote Leave, the group which led the campaign for the UK's exit from the EU. He described Brexit as a historic opportunity to finish the job Thatcher had started. One of his most eye-catching recent political interventions was his backing of Mr Sunak over Miss Truss in last summer's Conservative leadership contest, when he said Miss Truss' tax-cutting plans were not in the Thatcherite tradition and would risk going back to the mistakes of the 1970s. The financial market turmoil which followed the package of tax cuts announced in September's mini-budget will be cited by his admirers as evidence of the lasting quality of his economic judgment.
The UK's response to the plight of those taken hostage is failing British citizens, a group of MPs have warned. The Foreign Affairs Committee highlighted examples of ministerial clumsiness and hurtful comments in its communication with families. Conservative MP Alicia Kearns said families were too often left to feel they are an inconvenience. The government said the best interests of British detainees was at the heart of its consular work. The committee's inquiry examined recent high-profile cases of state-level hostage-taking, including Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anousheh Ashouri, who were released in March 2022 after years of detention in Iran. The British-Iranian nationals were arrested on spying charges, which they both denied. In a new report, the committee found the government had failed to learn lessons from past cases and had been too slow to call out countries for state hostage-taking. Ms Kearns, who chairs the committee, said the issue posed a growing threat to the UK, with abductor states weaponising the citizenship of British nationals and using them as diplomatic bargaining chips. The committee said communication around hostage-taking had been plagued by inconsistency and clumsiness, and that UK nationals had been let down by information shared by ministers. It cited the example of Boris Johnson when he was Foreign Secretary in 2017, wrongly saying Ms Zaghari-Ratcliffe had been teaching journalism in Iran. Her husband Richard Richard told the committee the comment was used in evidence against her at a subsequent trial and in Iranian propaganda. The report was also critical of then Foreign Secretary Liz Truss's handling of the case of Morad Tazbaz, a British-born environmentalist still held in Iran, who also holds Iranian and US nationality. It said Ms. Truss did not stand by an agreement with the US that Mr. Tazbaz would be released alongside Ms. Zaghari Ratcliffe and Mr. Ashuri in March 2022, and that his family first learnt this from the media. She eventually called the family and told them Morad is now a US problem, the report added. Ms. Kearns said the treatment of Mr. Tazbaz's family was frankly insensitive and hurtful. Families too often are left to feel like they are an inconvenience, she told BBC Radio 4's Today programme. Too often dual nationals felt like their Britishness was in question. The report also highlighted considerable ministerial transience in recent years, with 5 different foreign secretaries holding the post during Ms. Zaghari Ratcliffe's detention. It said this contributed to inconsistencies of approach and increased the risks of missing opportunities. The committee called for a new post, a director for arbitrary and complex detentions, with a direct line to the Prime Minister to provide a single point of contact for families and coordinate the government's response. The report rejected the Foreign Office's presumption that quiet diplomacy and family silence is always appropriate in hostage-taking situations. Silence abets state hostage-taking, it said, adding that the government should use the strongest possible language to call out cases where detentions are being used for leverage. A Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office spokesman said consulate officials are available 24/7 for families to receive tailored support. He added, the best interests of British national detainees is at the heart of our consular work, and we support and work with their families wherever we can.
Disney CEO Bob Iger has lashed out at Florida's Republican governor in an ongoing public battle between the entertainment company and the state. On Monday, Mr. Iger said that Governor Ron DeSantis' recent actions have been anti-business and anti-Florida. State lawmakers targeted Disney after it criticized a Florida law curtailing gender and sexuality education. Mr. DeSantis has pushed for more state control over Disney's Orlando theme parks in the dispute. During a Monday meeting with Disney shareholders, Mr. Iger said a company has a right to speech just like individuals do, according to US media. He said that Mr. DeSantis got very angry about the position Disney took, referring to the company's objection to the state's Parental Rights in Education Act, dubbed by critics as the Don't Say Gay bill. The measure bans school instruction about sexual orientation and gender identity for pupils aged 9 and under. In his remarks, Mr. Iger also acknowledged a fight over a last-minute contract signed before Florida forced Disney to hand over uniquely held powers to state officials. It seems like he's decided to retaliate against us, including the naming of a new board to oversee the property and the business, in effect to seek to punish a company for its exercise of constitutional right, Mr. Iger said. That just seems really wrong to me. Mr. Iger, who was leading his first investors meeting since returning as Disney's CEO in November 2022, added any action that thwarts those efforts simply to retaliate for a position the company took sounds not just anti-business, but it sounds anti-Florida, and I'll just leave it at that. For more than 50 years, the Walt Disney World territory operated within Florida's Reedy Creek Improvement District and essentially acted as a self-governing area, with control of utilities and a fire department. In February, Mr. DeSantis signed a bill that subjects Disney to additional layers of external oversight through a 5-member board, now appointed by the state. But last week, the new board said it had been neutered by the last-minute contract. That contract gives Disney near total control over development in the district in perpetuity or until 21 years after the death of the last survivor of the descendants of King Charles III, King of England. Mr. DeSantis and his allies called the move an attempt to defy the will of Floridians and state lawmakers. The governor has ordered an investigation into the outgoing board. The battle over cultural issues between Mr. DeSantis and Disney has helped elevate the governor's profile as a potential 2024 Republican presidential frontrunner. He's widely expected to announce his candidacy in the coming months. On Monday, Mr. DeSantis signed a law allowing residents to carry a concealed firearm without a permit or training. The law is due to take effect on the 1st of July and will make Florida the 26th US state to allow permitless carry.
Full-size self-driving bus services will begin in Scotland next month in what is believed to be a world first. Stagecoach said that the route over the Forth Road Bridge would launch on the 15th of May. The 14-mile route will run between Ferry Toll Park and Ryde in Fife and Edinburgh Park train and tram interchange. 5 single-decker autonomous buses will have the capacity for about 10,000 passenger journeys per week. The vehicles have sensors enabling them to travel on pre-selected roads at up to 50 miles per hour. They'll have 2 members of staff on board. A safety driver will sit in the driver's seat to monitor the technology, and a so-called bus captain will help passengers with boarding, buying tickets and queries. The UK government said Project CAV Forth would be the world's first full-size self-driving public bus service. Scottish Government Transport Minister Kevin Stewart said, "This is an exciting milestone for this innovative and ambitious project, and I very much look forward to seeing Project CAV4 take to the roads next month. Our trunk road network can provide a wide range of environments as a diverse testing ground, and the groundbreaking and globally significant project will really help Scotland establish its credentials on the world stage." Stagecoach UK Managing Director Carla Stockton-Jones added, "We are excited to introduce the UK's first autonomous bus fleet in East Scotland, which is also home to our headquarters and where it all began over 40 years ago. We are proud to be at the forefront of transport innovation with this project that marks a significant milestone for public transport, and we look forward to welcoming our customers on board in the coming months." The government has been urged to press ahead with plans to force criminals to attend their own sentencing hearings. Thomas Cashman refused to enter the dock when he was jailed for at least 42 years on Monday for the shooting and murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in her own home. The aunt of another murder victim called on Justice Secretary Dominic Raab to expedite plans to compel criminals to appear for sentencing. Farah Naz also wants judges to have the ability to punish those who refuse. The Ministry of Justice has been approached for a response. Opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer said because Olivia's family couldn't hide from Cashman's horrendous crimes, he shouldn't be allowed to either. Miss Naz's niece Zara Alina was sexually assaulted and murdered by Jordan McSweeney after he attacked the 35-year-old law graduate while walking home from a night out in Ilford, Essex on the 26th of June. Like Cashman, he also refused to attend his sentencing in person, leading Miss Naz to say he had wrongly taken control of the courtroom. She said, "It's the last bit of power that needs to be taken away from offenders. I think there are other ways to make the convict come to face their judgment, and that would be to add time to their sentencing, or there can be other ways. Otherwise, we don't have people deterred from committing crimes. If they're just moving from cell to cell, there's no sense of punishment. I would like Dominic Raab to move forward with developing this law." Miss Naz said she felt really sad for Olivia's family that they were not able to see the man who destroyed their lives being sentenced. "Surely the judgment is part of the punishment," she asked. "We all wanted to face him when we were reading out victim impact statements. We wanted to watch him watch the footage of his murdering Zara, what he did to her. As a result, the whole legal process felt incomplete. He took power over Zara, and then in the courtroom, he took power. It felt like he was able to have that. Surely, once they have been convicted, all their rights are removed." Cashman, aged 34, killed Olivia and injured her mother, Cheryl Corbell, as he chased a fellow drug dealer into their Dovecot home on the 22nd of August. Neither Cashman nor his intended target, Joseph Nee, were known to Miss Corbell. Sentencing him in absentia at Manchester Crown Court, Miss Justice Amanda Yip said drug dealer Cashman's refusal to appear in court was disrespectful to Olivia's family. She said he was not of previous good character, had made it clear he was a criminal, and had demonstrated no remorse. His failure to come into court is further evidence of that. Commenting on Cashman's refusal to enter the dock, a Ministry of Justice source said Olivia and her family weren't able to hide from Thomas Cashman's crime, so he shouldn't be able to hide from justice. The source said this is exactly why the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, is committed to changing the law so that offenders are forced to face the consequences of their actions. Following McSweeney's sentencing, Mr Raab said in February he was examining whether judges should be able to impose longer terms on those who refused to come to court. Labour leader Sir Keir added, "For some time we have been saying there needs to be a change in the law to stop this. For many victims and their families, there is this sense of a gap in the process if the defendant doesn't actually come and face justice. Of course, this is cowardly. One of the ideas would be to allow the judge to have the power to increase the sentence if the defendant didn't come into court to face justice. We should look at all options. We need something that works." He added, "At the moment, there is that profound sense of a gap for victims and their families, and we need to do something about that. We've been calling for this for some time now. The government says it is interested in that."
L'Oreal has agreed to buy Australian skincare brand Aesop in a deal worth $2.53 billion or £2 billion. The French beauty giant's largest takeover in decades. The brand is a superb combination of urbanity, hedonism, and undeniable luxury, L'Oreal Chief Executive Nicolas Hieronimus said. Since its founding 36 years ago, Aesop has developed a cult following around the world for its products, including soaps, lotions, and creams. Aesop has almost 400 stores globally. The deal, which is subject to regulatory approvals, is expected to close in the third quarter of this year. Mr. Hieronimus said that L'Oreal will help Aesop expand in China, where it opened its first store in 2022. Aesop taps into all of today's ascending currents, and L'Oreal will contribute to unleash its massive potential, notably in China and travel retail, he added. Brazilian cosmetics company Natura & Co. bought a majority stake in Aesop in 2012 before taking full ownership of the brand 4 years later. It became Natura's highest revenue earner over the decade between 2012 and 2022. Aesop gross sales jumped from $28 million to to $537 million during the period. Aesop was founded in 1987 by hairdresser Dennis Paphitis, who had started blending essential oils into products at his salon in Melbourne, Australia. As demand grew, he developed samples for customers. Mr. Paphitis eventually named his brand after the famous Greek fabulist and storyteller Aesop. Natura chief executive Fabio Barbosa said the company would now focus improving its other businesses, including the UK high street chain The Body Shop, which it bought from L'Oreal in 2017. We are confident that Aesop's growth story will continue under the ownership of L'Oreal and wish Aesop continued success in this new chapter, Mr. Barbosa added.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has promised a clampdown on potholes as campaigning for the local elections gets underway. On a visit to Darlington in northeast England, he said new powers would help ensure firms repair roads properly after carrying out works through more fines and inspections. Some 230 councils across England are holding elections on the 4th of May. The PM was in Darlington for a campaign visit alongside Tees Valley Mayor Ben Hochen and local MP Peter Gibson. The Conservatives are currently the largest party on Darlington Council after Labour lost control of the council in the 2019 local elections. The area is part of the so-called Red Wall of former Labour strongholds in the north of England and the Midlands, which Conservatives are keen to retain at the next general election. Earlier this week, the Tories also set out plans to tackle antisocial behaviour, including banning the sale of nitrous oxide and making people who vandalise public spaces repair the damage they cause. The Prime Minister said the Tories were delivering locally for the North East, with the government putting more money into fixing potholes and clamping down on utility companies which left behind damage after digging up roads. There'll be more fines and more inspections. That's also going to help. We want to make sure it's easy for people to get around, he added. New regulations, which were announced last year and come into force on Saturday, will bring in a performance-based inspection regime, with companies assessed on the quality of their road repairs and the worst performing companies inspected more. The Department for Transport said highway authorities now charge £50 per inspection and a further £120 for follow-up inspections, so there would be a financial incentive for firms to improve. The government said it was investing more than £5.5 billion between 2020 and 2025 in highway maintenance, with an extra £200 million to help fix potholes announced in March's budget. Labour's Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Hay accused the government of playing catch-up after its own failures have left UK roads crumbling. In 2021, the Prime Minister vowed to make potholes a thing of the past, but his decisions have left millions of them on our roads, she said. The Liberal Democrats said the announcement was nothing new and just a complete rehash. Motoring groups have previously called for more investment to help improve the state of the country's roads. Earlier this month, a survey commissioned by the Asphalt Industry Alliance suggests councils in England and Wales only received 2/3 of what they needed this year to stop local roads further deteriorating. The organisation said budgets had not kept pace with cost increases and government's funding was not enough to prevent further decline of road conditions. It found that 80% of the local roads network had been assessed as being in poor condition and having less than 5 years of life remaining. Rises in the cost of essential bills are now taking effect, adding pressure to strained budgets, but the lowest earners also receive better pay. The start of April marks the point at which council tax, water bills and some mobile costs rise, coming just as food prices are soaring. But the biggest cash increase in the 24-year history of the minimum wage also comes into force. Nearly 2 million people will receive £10.42 an hour from now, a 92p rise. Those on the lowest incomes have been hardest hit by the soaring cost of living because a greater proportion of their money is eaten up by vital household costs such as energy and groceries. The government has allowed local authorities in England to increase council tax by up to 5%, and most have opted for the biggest possible rise. That means an increase of about £100 a year for the average Band D property. Last year, residents in Bands A to D homes received £150 off their bill to help with the cost of living, but that was a one-off. There are discounts for those living on their own or in a home that has been adapted to take into account their disabilities. Support grants are also available but also need to be claimed. Different systems operate in Wales, where the typical rise is about 5.5%, and in Scotland, where many areas see a 3% increase. The alternative domestic rating system in Northern Ireland will see household pay at least 6% more. The winter discount for nearly all bill payers has now come to an end, with no sign of the government repeating this support. This saw a total of £400 taken off energy bills by suppliers in 6 instalments of about £67 a month. In some areas, standing charges, the fixed costs of being connected to the network, are going up. This will increase some bills, even though the warmer, longer days should reduce gas and electricity usage. Bills have been scheduled for a sharper rise in April, but ministers offering a 3-month extension to the energy price guarantee, which caps the unit price of energy and means the typical household will pay £2,500 per year. The next round of cost of living payments worth hundreds of pounds for 8 million people on low incomes, and receiving benefits will be paid automatically towards the end of the year. The cost of most mobile and broadband contracts can go up by the Consumer Price Index, CPI, or Retail Prices Index, RPI, measures of inflation, plus nearly 4%, adding 17.3% to the price of some services. Those increases are being imposed by a host of suppliers for customers still in contract. Not all will do so exactly on the 1st of April, but it will be around this time. The rules are controversial and under investigation by regulators. The Consumer Association, which has described the mid-contract price hikes as completely unfair. Millions of broadband and mobile customers are trapped in a catch-22 situation where they either have to accept exorbitant and difficult to justify mid-contract price hikes or pay costly exit fees to leave their contract early and find a better deal, said Rocio Concha, which Director of Policy and Advocacy. Anyone out of contract is free to shop around to cut the cost. Most providers allow you to check whether you are still in contract by sending a text with the word info to 85075. Suppliers also have cheaper social tariffs available for the most vulnerable. In terms of water bills, your bill for water depends on the area where you live, but on average in England and Wales it has now gone up by 7.5% or £31 per year. The increase, the biggest for 20 years, could be as high as £47 for some. The average household in England and Wales will pay £448 a year, industry body Water UK has said. As with broadband, social tariffs are available but inconsistent. In Scotland, bills rise by an average of £19 or 5%. In terms of car tax and prescription charges, also rising. Vehicle excise duty, a legal requirement for all vehicles, is rising by 10.1% for car, van and motorcycle drivers, in line with inflation. The amount due depends on when the vehicle was registered and its emissions. An NHS prescription now costs £9.65, up by 3.2%, and the cost of prescription prepayment certificates has also gone up. Postage stamps have become more expensive as of Monday, and Sarah Cole, head of personal finance at investment platform Hargreaves Lansdown, said their research suggested people had already eaten into the majority of what they had managed to set aside during the pandemic. It's going to be another awful April, as rising bills leaving us nursing a serious blow to the wallet. Millions of people have already had their financial resilience laid low after a year of runaway prices, she said. The extra cost of April's changes is going to come as another miserable blow when we can at least manage it. In terms of help with a higher minimum wage, one thing that will assist with the bills for around 2 million people on the lowest incomes is a pay rise. The increase of up to 9.7% in minimum wages varies by the age of the employee. The new rates are for the national living wage for over 23s, it's £10.42 an hour, up from £9.50. National minimum wage for those aged 21 and 22, up from £10.18 from £9.18. National minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds, now £7.49, up from £6.83. National minimum wage for under 18s, £5.28, up from £4.81. And the apprenticeship rate at £5.28, up from £4.81. A 10.1% increase in most benefits and the state pension will take effect from the 10th of April. Almost a quarter of teachers in England are working 12-hour days, according to a leaked government document. Some 22% of teachers said they were working 60 hours a week or more. The research commissioned by the Department for Education, DfE, was carried out in spring 2022 and has not yet been made public. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan has said a new task force will be created to help reduce teachers' workload by an average of 5 hours a week. Teaching unions are currently consulting members in England on a new pay offer, which includes the promise to reduce their workload. The leaked document, marked confidential and titled Working Lives of Teachers and Leaders, was produced for the DfE to examine issues around teacher supply, recruitment and retention. More than 11,000 teachers and leaders across primary and secondary schools were questioned. The report found 1 in 4 were considering leaving the state sector in the next year, with most of this group citing higher workload as a key factor behind their decision. 3/4 of teachers said they spent too much time on paperwork, while 2/3 of senior leaders felt they were spending too much time responding to government policy changes. 1 in 5 teachers surveyed reported that satisfaction with their working life was low. Nearly half of those responding said they would rate their anxiety levels as high. Almost 3/4 of teachers said their workload was unacceptable. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said the report was a snapshot of an overworked, overstretched and underappreciated school workforce and criticised the government for failing to act on the findings sooner. Mary Boosted, a joint General Secretary of the National Education Union, accused ministers of withholding important information from the School Teachers Review Review Body, which makes recommendations on teachers' pay and takes into account the advantages and disadvantages of the profession as a whole. She told the BBC the government have sat on this report for months and they didn't provide this evidence to the Teachers' Review Body. It's clear the government wanted to bury bad news about the extent and intensity of teacher workload. The government says its submissions to review bodies include relevant data which is in the public domain at the time. The DfE has put forward what it has described as the government's final pay deal to education unions, whose members have undertaken a number of days of industrial action in recent months. Most staff would get a £1,000 payment this year and a 4.3% rise next year. The starting salary for teachers in England is due to rise to £30,000 a year by September 2023. The spokesperson for the government said ministers had made teachers a fair and reasonable pay offer, which included a commitment on bringing down working hours. We are listening to teachers about the issues that affect them, which is why our offer also committed to reducing workload by 5 hours per week. The NEU has announced another 2 potential strike days in England and is urging members to reject the deal. A University College London study in 2019 found teachers in England have worked an average of 46 to 49 hours a week over the last 25 years. The researchers said the data showed that reducing teachers' hours would be difficult and may require radical action. The UK has signed a deal to join a trade pact with 11 Asia and Pacific nations 3 years after it officially left the European Union. Joining the group will boost UK exports by cutting tariffs on goods such as cheese, cars, chocolate, machinery, gin and whiskey, the government said. However, the government's own estimates show being in the bloc will only add 0.08% to the size of the UK's economy. The trade area covers a market of around 500 million people. The Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP, was established in 2018 and includes Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore and Vietnam. Membership of the CPTPP loosens restrictions on trade between members and reduces tariffs, a form of border tax on goods. Together, the 11 members account for about 13% of the world's income, and after 21 months of negotiations, the UK has become the first European country to join. The government said the agreement was the UK's biggest trade deal since Brexit. However, the gains for the UK from joining are expected to be modest. The UK already has free trade deals with all of the members except Brunei and Malaysia, some of which were rolled over from its previous membership of the EU. And even with some gains in trading, the government only estimates it will add 0.08% to the size of the economy in 10 years. The Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, which provides forecasts for the government, has previously said Brexit would reduce the UK's potential economic growth by about 4% in the long term. But Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the deal demonstrated the real economic benefits of our post-Brexit freedoms. As part of CPTPP, the UK is now in a prime position in the global economy to seize opportunities for new jobs, growth and innovations. British businesses will now enjoy unparalleled access to markets from Europe to the South Pacific. Business and Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch said the agreement was like buying a startup. This is not to replace EU trade, this is in addition. We are still in a free trade agreement with the EU, she told Radio 4's Today programme. You wouldn't buy a small company like that and expect it to be delivering on the day. We are thinking about the potential, she said, adding that in 7 years, 40% of the world's middle class is going to come from that region. Ms Badenoch denied that there would be any hit to UK agriculture, saying the deal would create new markets for farmers. Labour's Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas-Symonds said the UK joining the CPTPP was encouraging, but added that questions remain on consumer safety, food safety, data protection and environmental protections. The government said other benefits of being in the bloc included a boost to the service sector by UK firms not being required to establish a local office or be resident to supply a service, meaning they'll be on a par with local firms. The government said it and the CPTPP members would make the final legal and administrative steps required for the UK to formally sign in 2023. Scotland's former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says social media speculation over her private life made it appear much more exciting than it was. She told BBC Scotland political editor Glenn Campbell that some people wanted to believe there was a hidden secret life of Nicola Sturgeon. She addressed gossip over her marriage and sexuality in a new BBC podcast. Ms Sturgeon announced in February that she was stepping down in part because of the brutality of political life. In the interview for the Nicola Sturgeon podcast, the 52-year-old reflected on her 8 years leading the government at Holyrood and what life might hold next. In episode 2, Ms Sturgeon was asked what she thought of social media speculation. Apart from the fact that I read accounts of my private life on social media and I think, it's so much more glamorous sounding and so much more exciting. I've got houses everywhere if you believe social media, she laughed. Ms Sturgeon added, the fact that people still don't think they know everything about me, well, to some extent, I take that as a bit of an achievement because I've obviously managed to protect a little bit of a private persona, and that is a good thing. But of course, for other people, it isn't, because they don't know anything about me. It is because they want to pretend, and they want other people to believe there is one hidden secret life of Nicola Sturgeon, which sadly in some respects I'm afraid is not the case. She went on to say that by stepping away from the high profile role, she was seeking a bit more privacy, a bit more anonymity. Miss Sturgeon became First Minister and SNP leader after a referendum of September 2014 failed to deliver Scottish independence. At that point, she was already a seasoned politician, having been a member of the Scottish Parliament since 1999 and deputy leader of her party since 2004. Under her stewardship, she led the SNP to a series of election victories at UK, Scottish and local level. When Miss Sturgeon announced her resignation at a hastily arranged press conference on the 15th of February, her colleagues talked of their shock. Her then Deputy First Minister John Swinney said he was very sorry to hear the news, but completely understood. Miss Sturgeon told the gathered media that a First Minister was never off duty, had virtually no privacy, and it takes its toll on you and those around you. In this second episode of the BBC podcast, crime writer Val McDermott said some of the rumours she had heard about Miss Sturgeon were laughable in their absurdity. The politician's thread added that there were those who wrongly claimed exclusive knowledge about her. McDermott said she, Sturgeon, had been a focus for the lies as well as the criticism, and that is deeply upsetting. The podcast also heard from Liz Lloyd, who was Miss Sturgeon's chief of staff and had worked with her for more than 20 years. She speaks about her former boss's look when you say something stupid, her sharp sense of humour, and the fact she can laugh at herself. Miss Sturgeon formally stepped down on the 27th of March when her former Health Secretary, Humza Yousaf, won the contest to succeed her as SNP leader and First Minister. Although giving up from frontline politics, she will remain an SNP MSP for the Glasgow Southside constituency and sit on the backbenches. What are you planning to cook when you next make something from scratch in the kitchen? A nice bit of salmon, lamb chops, or maybe a vegan pasta dish? Whatever you have in mind, it will probably involve using some form of spice or herb, whether it's just a sprinkle of freshly ground black pepper, a hint of thyme, or a blizzard of cumin. Spice is the key, says UK TV chef and cookery book writer Parveen Ashraf, also known as a spice queen. It livens up food, gives it flavour, it makes it come alive. She believes there's a clear current winner in the battle for our taste buds. The spice I think that's really taken over is turmeric, she says. Now, next time you go out, you notice everything that's got turmeric in it, it's everywhere. If you're a big fan of spicy food, then buying spices for your cooking is something you take for granted. Yet industry expert Donald Pratt says that demand for herbs and spices has actually risen strongly in recent years. Mr. Pratt, who's in charge of sourcing for US giant McCormick, the biggest spices and herbs company on the planet, says there are a number of factors behind the current strength of the market. We think the pandemic accelerated the aspect of everyone being a bit more sophisticated in their kitchen, and you see younger generations getting into heat and flavour explorations all over the place. We see it across the board globally as cultures and cuisines come together. He adds that increased health concerns are also playing a part. This desire to eat healthier is a global trend, so more home cooking with natural ingredients and replacing salt, sugar and fat with flavour from herbs and spices. Such is the increased use of herbs and spices in cooking around the world that one report estimates that the global market will be worth $126 billion or £103 billion by the end of this year, up from $79 billion in 2022. Ms. Ashraf adds that the increased use of different spices is being fueled by people posting photos, videos and recipes of their cooking on social media. Suddenly you've got recipes that travel around the world at the touch of your fingertips, she says. In addition, Ms. Ashraf points to studies which suggest that spices such as turmeric, cumin and cinnamon have direct health benefits, which she says further adds to their popularity. On a country-by-country basis, the biggest producer of spices is India. It is also the largest exporter, and in the financial year 2021 to 2022, the value of its exports totaled $4.1 billion. Other major spice exporting countries include Indonesia, China, Vietnam and Brazil. But even if your country earns millions exporting spices, you won't necessarily make a decent living working in the industry at the farm level. In fact, some critics like Sana Javira Kadri say poverty is endemic to the sector. She's the Mumbai-based founder of spice trading firm Diaspora Co. Her venture now buys spices from 150 farms across India and Sri Lanka and aims to combat low pay in the industry. Farmers are getting paid very little, says Ms. Kadri. To try to lift wages in the sector, she is disrupting the traditional trading model for Indian spice by buying it directly from farms instead of going via middlemen. As a result, she says that she can pay the farm owners 4 times as much. She adds that in turn, she is encouraging the farm owners to pay more to their workers out in the fields with moderate success. She wants to see wages go up from about 300 to 350 rupees a day, which is the equivalent of £3 to £3.50 to 500 to 600 rupees a day. Ms. Kadri also wants to see farm owners improve living conditions for workers, which in poorer regions can be absolutely awful. Ms. Pratt says McCormack takes a leadership role in raising standards across the industry. A especially when it comes to stamping out worker exploitation and promoting sustainability. What we're bringing, whether it be technically supporting good agricultural practices, or how to introduce biodiversity into their supply chains, or how to help them to improve their living conditions, are all part of our contribution, he says. We're in the industry to figure out how to make it even more resilient, so 20, 30, 40 years from now, farming communities are still delivering wholesome herbs and spices. In California, Chrissy Skomenga is the co-owner of Boonville Barn Collective, which sells dried chilies and other products made from crops grown at its 7-acre farm in Anderson Valley, some 125 miles north of San Francisco. She says that higher energy bills and other inflationary pressures are having an impact on the business, as they are on other farms and food producers. We're trying to figure out how we can internalize some of the increased costs instead of having to raise prices on people, said Ms. Skomenga. No one wants to raise the price right now, and consumers don't want to see a higher price. TV chef Ms. Ashraf believes that even with the difficulties facing some in the spice trade, demand from consumers will only grow and grow. She points to her own children as a sign of things to come. Their palates are more international than mine was at that age, and I think their children will be even more au fait with food from different cultures. A man has been found guilty of murdering his partner's 2-year-old daughter. Carl Bevan, aged 31, of Aberystwyth, Ceredigion, subjected Lola James to a brutal assault while he was alone with her in July 2020. Lola's mother, Sinead James, aged 30, of Neyland, Pembrokeshire, was also found guilty of causing or allowing her death. Lola died in hospital having suffered a catastrophic head injury. Bevan, James's boyfriend, blamed the family dog for the death, but a jury took just over 10 hours to find him guilty of murder. Swansea Crown Court heard Bevan from Aberystwyth told the police Lola's injuries were caused by the family dog, an American bulldog called Jessie, which pushed her down the stairs. The prosecution said the claim was a deliberate lie to cover up his guilt. Bevan had lived in the family home in Haverfordwest for 4 months before he killed Lola. The court heard he used drugs including Xanax, cannabis and amphetamines, and had a volatile temper. He subjected Lola to a brutal assault between the evening of the 16th of July and the morning of the 17th of July 2020. Lola, described as a happy, beautiful and busy little girl, was found to have 101 cuts and bruises on her body. She experienced head trauma likened to injuries sustained in a high-velocity car crash. Phone records show that at around 6:30 a.m. British Standard Time on the 17th of July, Bevan googled, "My 2-year-old child has just taken a bang to the head and gone all limp and it's snoring. What's wrong?" Bevan waited another hour before calling an ambulance at around 7:30 a.m. The court heard that when paramedics arrived at the home, they found Lola lying unconscious with a swollen and bruised face, and she also appeared to be wet. Investigators later noticed that the bath was spotlessly clean, despite the rest of the house being dirty. A vomit and blood-stained grey onesie was also found in the corner of the living room. The prosecutor said it is believed all that was part of Carl Bevan's attempt to destroy evidence. "We say that, rather than face up to what he did to the little girl, Carl Bevan immediately tried to save himself. Rather than immediately call the emergency services, as surely would be natural had this been an accident, as he now says, he took time to concoct excuses and lies," Prosecutor Caroline Reese KC told the court. Jurors were shown photographs that Bevan took of Lola's injuries and a video he shot of her unconscious and badly injured. In the video, a topless Bevan is seen lifting an unresponsive Lola and trying to stand her up. He then lets her go and a thud can be heard as she falls to the ground. Bevan then places Lola back on the sofa where she can be heard snoring, and he walks towards the camera saying, "She's gone, she's gone."
The CBI has temporarily postponed all its public engagements and events after fresh sexual misconduct claims against the business lobby group emerged. Its annual dinner, at which the Chancellor is usually the keynote speaker, will now not go ahead. The CBI is facing a number of claims, including sexual assault, and has hired a law firm to investigate. It said it has treated and continues to treat all matters of workplace conduct with the utmost seriousness. Sources said Chancellor Jeremy Hunt was not due to attend this year's dinner, which has been scheduled for the 11th of May because he will be out of the country. But the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey had been set to go. The BBC also understands that a guest speaker had pulled out of the CBI event in Northern Ireland. The Guardian recently published several allegations. The most serious is from a woman who claims she was raped by a senior colleague at a CBI summer boat party in 2019. The woman told the newspaper she felt let down by a CBI manager who she claims advised her to seek out counselling rather than pursue the matter further. A CBI spokesperson said, "We have found no evidence or record of this matter. Given the seriousness of the issue, it is part of the independent investigation being conducted by Fox Williams." The organisation's Director General, Tony Danker, recently stepped aside pending an investigation into separate alleged incidents, for which he has apologised profusely and claimed was completely unintentional. The BBC understands that these new allegations published by The Guardian do not relate to Mr. Danker. In a statement on Tuesday, a CBI spokesperson said, "In light of the very serious allegations that are currently subject to independent investigation, the CBI has decided to temporarily pause its external program of events, including the annual dinner on the 11th of May. After Easter, the board hopes to have preliminary findings and actions from the first phase of the investigation, and among other steps, will review this pause in event activity at that point. Some company executives who are members of the CBI have described this as an existential crisis for an organization that describes itself as the most effective and influential business organization, representing 190,000 businesses across the UK.
Community sentence handed down to a man who raped a 13-year-old girl when he was 17 has been described as extraordinary by a leading KC. Sean Hogg, now aged 21, attacked the girl in Dalkeith Country Park, Midlothian on various occasions in 2018. Judge Lord Lake said if the offence had been committed by an adult over 25, Hogg would have received a jail sentence of 4 or 5 years. Tommy Rose KC said the 270-hour community sentence was very unusual. Hogg's punishment has also been condemned by Rape Crisis Scotland, who said it was inexplicable. BBC Scotland requested and obtained a copy of the judge's sentencing notes, which detail the reasoning behind the sentence. New guidelines for sentencing under 25s were introduced in Scotland in January 2022. They made rehabilitation rather than punishment a primary consideration, recommending an individualistic approach taking into account their life experiences. Mr. Ross, who has worked on major cases including the murder of Margaret Fleming, told BBC Radio's Good Morning Scotland programme he had never seen a case like it. The KC said it is an extraordinary sentence. I've been working in the High Court for around 20 years and I've never seen anybody avoid prison for rape until yesterday. Sandy Brindley, Chief Executive of Rape Crisis Scotland, expressed concern about the message such a case sent out. Speaking on BBC Radio Scotland's Drive Time, she also criticised the fact it took 4 years to come to court. Ms. Brindley said, of course, the role of the justice system should be about rehabilitation, but there also needs to be a sense of it giving some sense of justice victims time. I just don't see how the sentence can do that. On the prospect of the sentence being overturned, she told the programme, it is hard to imagine a case more deserving of that judgment of unduly lenient than the rape of a 13-year-old girl. Why did the judge not impose a custodial sentence? Judge Lord Lake told Hogg rape was one of the most serious crimes and noted the effect on his victim was likely to be marked and long-lasting, especially given her age and apparent vulnerability. But he said the rapist's age was an important factor. The judge said it had taken just over 4 years for the case to come to court, and Hogg had not been involved in any other sexual offending during that time. He added, I consider that it is inappropriate that you should be sentenced as you would have been sentenced had it been brought to trial more rapidly when you would still have been in your teens. This means that you're considered less culpable, less blameworthy. Lord Lake went on to state that while he had to consider punishment and deterrence, rehabilitation is the primary consideration. He added, it does not seem to me that imprisonment is the way most likely to lead to your rehabilitation. Lord Lake told the court the Criminal Justice Social Work report noted Hogg had not had an easy upbringing, had mental health difficulties, and a history of substance abuse. He said, despite these problems, the report notes that you did well in your school leaving exams. This factor also suggests that rehabilitation will be possible. Lord Lake then detailed the terms of the order as well as a 3-year offender supervision requirement. Hogg must also attend an annual progress review in 2024 and 2025. Lord Lake told Hogg he considered imposing a restriction of liberty order, but decided not to do so based on the concerns expressed in the Criminal Justice Social Work report. He added it considers that an order would make you more isolated and could have an adverse effect on your mental health. In the past, drugs consumption has been an issue for you, and it seems as if you still have problems with alcohol. Imposing a ROLO might have removed you from harm from these sources, but would expose you to other risks. Court papers stated Hogg of Hamilton, South Lanarkshire, threatened the girl, seized her by the wrists, and forced her to carry out a sex attack before raping her. He was found guilty by a jury and appeared in the dock for sentencing in tears at the High Court in Glasgow. Lord Lake told Hogg that if the offence was committed by an adult over 25, they would attract a sentence of 4 or 5 years. As well as 270 hours of community work, Hogg was also put under supervision and on the sex offenders register for 3 years. Donald Findlay, KC defending, told the court an appeal was planned. A spokesperson for the Crown Office said, as with all cases, the Crown will consider the sentence and given consideration to whether it might be unduly lenient.
A set of bowls displayed in a house for decades has made more than £112,000 at auction. The ceramics, stored in a cardboard box before being offered for sale, turned out to be rare Chinese porcelain. 4 16th century Chinese Ming Dynasty wukai dishes were given a £4,000 to £6,000 guide price but sold for £63,000. The seller said his late mother from Derbyshire collected bowls and expected them to be worth around £30, adding the result was unbelievable. The retired computer engineer, who wished to remain anonymous, said plates, bowls and dishes had been displayed at his mother's home in Etwold for decades. He took them for auction and was soon told they were rare and would have a guide price of thousands. The 67-year-old said what happened next was unbelievable. I watched the auction live online and the prices kept rocketing. I was shouting at the computer. My sister was watching live online from Australia and we were texting each other. We just couldn't believe what was happening. The auction house Hanson's said the 4 Ming Dynasty dragon and phoenix dishes each had 6 character marks of the Wanli Emperor who reigned from 1573 to 1620 and were decorated with a blue 5-clawed dragon, mustard green phoenix bird, flowers and Buddhist emblems. 3 phone bidders competed for the set, with the winner coming from China. The hammer price of £63,000 plus a buyer's premium saw a total of £81,900 paid for the set. Other treasures from the box were an imperial porcelain yellow ground medallion bowl, Dao ground 1821 to 1850, which sold for £14,500, and an imperial porcelain famille rose pig ground medallion bowl of the same age, which went for £8,800. Hanson said with a buyer's premium, the 3 lots made a total of £112,190. Hanson's owner Charles Hanson added what made the 4 dishes, which achieved £63,000 particularly special, was the fact that they'd remained together as a set. They may have been used as altar pieces in a Chinese monastery or temple. They probably came to England after the First or Second World War. British boxer Amir Khan has been banned for 2 years after an anti-doping test revealed the presence of a banned substance following his fight against Kell Brook in February 2022. The former light welterweight world champion tested positive for Ostarine. Khan, who retired from boxing in May, accepted he broke anti-doping rules but said it was not intentional. An independent tribunal accepted that argument, ruling out deliberate or reckless conduct by the 36-year-old. I've never cheated, Khan told Sky Sports News, but I've got a 2-year ban now, which is quite strange and funny because I'm already retired anyway. There's no comeback planned at all, but I've never cheated and I never will. That's just not something I would do. The UK Anti-Doping UK ad website states Ostarine is a drug designed to have similar effects to testosterone. In October, British sprinter CJ Uja was banned for 22 months after he tested positive for 2 banned substances, including Ostarine at the Tokyo Olympics. UKAD rejected Khan's defense that the Ostarine was transmitted by a tainted supplement or human contact, but also decided the dose was too small to be intentional and give any performance advantage. This case serves as a reminder that UKAD will diligently pursue anti-doping rule violations in order to protect clean sport. UKAD Chief Executive Jane Rumble said, strict liability means athletes are ultimately responsible for what they ingest and for the presence of any prohibitive substances in a sample. Boxer, which promoted the Khan Brook event, said it was disappointed to learn about Khan's ban via social media on Tuesday, adding it is vehemently against any use of any illegal or performance-enhancing substances taken by athletes. The ban from all sport is deemed to have begun on the 6th of April 2022 and expires on the 5th of April 2024. Fellow Briton Conor Benn failed 2 voluntary drug tests for female fertility drug clomiphene before his cancelled bout with Chris Eubank Jr. in October. Benn was allowed back into the World Boxing Council rankings after it ruled his failed drug test was not intentional and could have been caused by highly elevated consumption of eggs. However, he remains under investigation by UKAD and the British Boxing Board Control, BBBOC, and is unable to fight in the United Kingdom as he does not have a boxing license. Khan, who won a silver medal at the 2004 Athens Olympics as a 17-year-old, turned professional in 2005. In 2009, he became world champion, defeating Andreas Koltenick at Manchester Arena for the WBA light welterweight title. His win over South Judah in 2011 earned him the IBF belt and unified champion status. Khan then lost the titles in his next fight to Lamont Peterson. He was beaten by Brook via a 6th round knockout in what proved to be his final professional bout. Khan retired from the sport 3 months later, finishing his career with 34 professional wins and 6 losses, having turned professional in 2005. Outside the ring, he has maintained a strong public profile through his appearances in Australia-based reality game show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and his own BBC reality TV show Meet the Khans, Big in Bolton. He is due to make a second appearance on I'm a Celebrity this month, this time based in South Africa. Amir Khan is one of Britain's greatest boxers. His silver medal as a 17-year-old at the Athens Olympics in 2004 made him into a household name. He was a world champion, fought the best from Sal Canelo Alvarez to Terence Crawford, and his retirement fight against Kell Brook was a typically thrilling end to a storied career. The Brook fight was 17 years in the making and a huge event that captured the attention of boxing and the wider sports world, despite it being well past its sell-by date. Both men were 35 when the fight happened and have since retired. UKAD's announcement adds a different dimension to Khan's swan song. Testing positive on fight night has become more and more unusual, considering it is one of the few few times, a big boxing star can be guaranteed that they will be tested. Khan has been cleared of intentionally ingesting Ostarine after a lengthy investigation, but strict liability carries a mandatory 2-year ban regardless of intent.
An 87-year-old woman who did not heat her home because she was worried about high energy bills died after she was found suffering from profound hypothermia. Barbara Bolton's inquest was told she had ignored pleas from her family to heat her terraced house in Bury. She was discovered by her grandson at her kitchen table, unable to speak, on the 11th of December, and later died in hospital. A conclusion of misadventure was recorded by the coroner in Rochdale. The court heard that while Mrs. Bolton's family had encouraged her to put her heating on and told her not to worry about the cost, she would not listen. The coroner described how medics found she had a body temperature of just 28 centigrade rather than a healthy reading of 37. She was taken to Fairfield Hospital in Bury but died of pneumonia brought on by hypothermia on the 5th of January. Senior coroner Joanne Kersley told Mrs. Bolton's son Mark, "What comes across clearly from both the hospital statements and from your own is how much as a family you cared and looked after your mum. I think it was evident from the hospital that whatever had happened at home wasn't because the family weren't encouraging her to put her heating on or telling her not to worry. It's clear she was fixated on the worry of putting her heating on, no matter what anyone else was saying to her." The inquest heard hospital notes recorded that Mrs. Bolton's had deliberately not turned her heating on for fear of high energy bills. In his statement read to the court, Mark Bolton said his mother had only given up work as a Tesco pharmacy assistant at the age of 82, and medical evidence presented to the court said she had hardly ever visited a GP. Mr. Bolton said family members spoke to her every day and visited her often. He described how she would put a gas fire on in her living room when people visited and would only use heaters that her family had bought her when they were there. He told the hearing his mother was old school and said, "It was my way or no one's way with my mum." Recording a conclusion of misadventure, coroner said she seemed like quite a remarkable woman, still working at 82.